I want to circle back to the 3 new roles you see in content, where the future is going with content.
The front end is like essentially people on camera. I've been calling these personality marketers. The second role would be an AI content operations person. You're not going to stand out in your market if you're just doing always on marketing. You need to do big campaigns. So these people I'm going to be calling campaign directors, are part of the strategy with the personalities and the operations people to be like, here's the campaign that we're going to do in 2 months.
How do you know what of these are working?
There's sort of 2 different ways.
Stu, welcome to the show, man.
It's been a while, Eric. We've been like internet friends for quite a long time and have chatted a few times, but feels like a lot has changed since we last connected. So excited to dig into a few things.
A ton, yeah. And you've been in the content game for a long time, like doing it on your own, in your own like personal capacity, building podcasts, building on social for years and years and years, and then you've translated that into working for a lot of really notable, successful companies, and ultimately now running content at Mutiny, which is, a really well-known B2B company, and you're head of content there. And I'm really excited to kind of chat with you about like, number one, with like your opinion on what works with content for B2B today, almost like we could do the evolution of content marketing masterclass right now, because, we were chatting and you mentioned, over the last couple of years, your opinion on the approach to content marketing has changed completely. So maybe we could start there. Like, over the last couple of years, as you've been running content at Mutiny and some prior companies, like what has that evolution been for you on like what you think works with content today?
I got my foot in the door into content marketing by starting my own podcast. I had no previous schooling or background in marketing. I just one day came across Seth Godin and like read one of his books. And then that, was the entry point into learning about a whole bunch of other stuff. Okay, rewind. This is like 2019, 2018. Podcasting was still even then like, it was mainstream, but it wasn't saturated and was still like a viable kind of like content marketing plan. And so I just started recording, reaching out to people over Zoom and whoever would answer me. That's how I got in contact with you. I just cold messaged you on LinkedIn and asked if you wanted to do an episode. And then after a while, people started asking like if they could hire me. And I was like, hire me for what? And they're like, this is content marketing. I was like, oh, cool. Thanks for letting me know. Sure. Yeah, I'll take jobs. So that was, but like podcasting then was still sort of like cutting edge in terms of like a B2B content medium that was underutilized at that point. Now the change has happened really quickly, but also not as quickly as some of the B2C side of things you've seen. And so I always find that like as B2B creators, you have a little bit more room to breathe and time to assess the playing field and see what's working on the B2C side and on the consumer side of content, and then place strategic bets of like, okay, well, let's say that we're 18 months behind on this like maturity curve of content trends. Where am I going to place my bets, knowing that I kind of can see into the future, looking at my Instagram feed and my TikTok feed, because that is like bleeding edge. The commercialization and the B2B side of it can lag a little bit. So yeah, back then it was, long form video recordings. And then you would like pass it off to a writer who would then kind of transcribe it manually and write it into blog posts or different types of formats that you liked. I never was like all in on SEO. That was never a strategy that I kind of grew up using. So I've always been more on the editorial side of content and hand-to-hand content, as I've kind of called it, where you're emailing it to people. So through newsletters, through social, and through your sales team, so that they have, assets that are useful to them as they like go out and meet with prospects. But now that like whole content operation side of it, of like taking a long form interview and then turning it into blog posts at that point, has changed as well. Now that AI has been on the scene, where you can really accelerate the time from this, like generating source material to like a polished finished product that
Yep.
is in your brand tone and is like appropriate to post, that is like gone down from like 3 weeks to like through 30 seconds. So there's the pace of change of like what content people have had to think about over the last 2 years has been really, really interesting to see, both from, you know, the trends of like channels changing and dynamics of channels moving, and then like the emergence of AI has really like shaken it up, in my opinion.
And I think honestly, like for people in content right now, there's almost two ends of the spectrum. This is kind of encroaching on our career. And like, is this something to be nervous about around the stability of this career in content? And then the other end of the spectrum is this is actually enabling us to do our best work of our entire lives, because now we can focus on the editorial, we can focus on the creative. We don't have to focus on the blocking and tackling of like repurposing the content into different formats and different words. And the AI tools do a good job of that. You still need to kind of polish all that and get it down like correct, but it still saves a lot of time. But the number one most important thing still is, what's the content? The AI is not going to create the net new content for you with domain expertise relevant for your ICP. So that's where all the energy can now really be spent in a massive way.
I like how you framed it as like two different questions, as like two different areas. I'll get to the like application side of it, of like what workflows I'm using and how I'm actually seeing, you know, the light in terms of like AI enabling this really great work that is possible. That, you know, some people are still naysayers to, but like I've seen the light and it's there. But to like address the first question around, you know, our livelihood and like, is this going to, you know, completely ruin some people's careers? That's a totally valid place to be in, and that's a totally valid mindset to have. I don't think it's constructive. And, you know, that's just, luckily for me, you know, I've made a career out of sort of like moving at opportunities and
Yep.
have never and always, you know, been that startup-y style stuff. So different life stages for everyone. And, you know, it's going to affect people differently. It allows for you to focus on the finished product, less about the skills required to get there. And so it does, in a lot of ways, make it like possible for us to create the things that we have in our head.
Yes.
There's sort of like a good idea that your taste exceeds your skills when you're getting started off. Like in your head, you're like, oh, I can
So
see what
true.
I want to create, but
Yep.
I'm unable to physically make that thing yet. This happens to all of us when you start learning how to draw, learning how to paint, learning how to play music. You can hear it and you can see it in your head, and it just doesn't happen on paper or on the instrument. So that's like every amateur's dilemma. And so for a lot of people, that is where it ends. They just like, oh well, I guess I can't do it. I don't want to be bad at something, so I'm going to stop doing it. The true masters and the true craftsmen like continue, and they learn how to like silence that thing in their head of, oh, I'm just going to keep going and I'm going to keep creating, and it doesn't look perfect yet, but it's better than nothing. And then eventually your skills catch up to your taste and you're able to create amazing things. The cool thing though is your taste will always get better. It's not like your taste like stagnates and stops.
Yeah.
If your skill set gets better, your taste will also continue to get better, because you now have like more nodes connected in your brain of like how stuff you can possibly do. So that's always been true for like craftspeople and artisans. But now like AI has sort of given every person the ability to create stuff at like a really high granularity of what they have in their head. So like you can now go and just with a few words create an AI generated image and be like, oh yeah, that's actually like pretty close to the vibe and the aesthetic that I was looking for this campaign. Now I can like go and show it to people and get buy-in because there's like something there. It's not just words. Same goes for every medium. It's like now video editing is a little easier. Now, you know, image creation, now written content's easier. All of this is just, I think, a net positive for creative endeavors. There's the whole ethics of like where this came from. I'm not going to get into that because I don't really like, that's not something I try to like think about too much, because it's the snake is out of the bag or whatever the saying is. Like, it's just like, it's moved so quickly that you have to be willing to try to experiment with it, because it's such a unique opportunity for all of us as creative people who want to be in this world to take advantage of the tooling that's at our disposal. The same way as like when Photoshop came on the scene, people were for sure pissed off about it. Now no one would, there's now two sides of it. It's like you're either a hardcore computer generated person or you're like a manual person. And I think the same thing is going to play out in the content space,
Yep.
where you're going to have people who do everything the old school way and super manual, and they're going to find their niche, and they're going to find
Yep.
people who believe in that and want to support that. And then there's going to be people who go complete opposite, and that's going to have their own benefits. So that's sort of my opinion on like the first part of that question, which is like, is this good for a career or is it bad for a career? I think it depends on what you personally want to do. And I've thought a little bit about, what those new roles for content people are. We can chat about that. But it's kind of like up to you. It's like, if you want to dive into it, you should, because this is a really cool opportunity. And if you're not interested in diving into it, don't be surprised if people stop hiring you, stop thinking the way you do. Because at the end of the day, if you're in a marketing role, you are a commercial artist. Like you're not there to do art. You're there to sell products. So don't, that's been a like weird mindset shift where it's like, you can't be such a purist. Like we're already in a commercial space. So now's not the time to start thinking that you're like like a purist in your craft.
It's not the arts and crafts like department. Yeah, okay. I want to circle back to the 3 new roles you see in content that you actually posted about recently, because I think that's really really important and really crystallizes like the lens with which to look at where the future is going with content, because it's like we want to pair these roles with the use case in the future of how to best operationalize content for B2B companies going forward. So on the commercial side, though, implementing some of this and having it work and be effective for, for example, like what you guys are doing at Mutiny. Maybe we can get into that. Like what are you doing right now? Like what sort of what's your content ecosystem look like at Mutiny, and your philosophy around it, and really like how it bubbles up to the end goal, which is, pipeline revenue, things like that, in relation to, the other marketing levers that you all are pulling at Mutiny. Because I know, content's one bucket, but you've also got other tools that, marketing can use, paid, outbound. I'm not sure if you all have PLG or not, but just different tools there, and content is one bucket of that.
The operational side of using AI with content comes down to being very clear about what content formats are your final pieces. A lot of people start using AI with just like an idea of like, oh, the AI will know when the job is done. That's a complete wrong way to think about it. You as the prompter or the head of content or whatever your role is, if you're interacting with AI, you need to know what the finished product looks like before you go into it. You can use AI to like brainstorm and come up with what that finished product is, but you need to like have proprietary formats and assets that your company is known for and that you will continue to come back to time and time again as the finished product of this is ready to publish, this is good to go. And so within that, there's sort of 2 ways of thinking about it. One is like the actual structure. So does your company have repeatable content structures? For example, if you send a newsletter, is your newsletter, does it have, reoccurring headers? Sort of like a newspaper where it's like, here's the main story. Then we're going to get into like a little promotion of like something that you're doing at the company. Then you're going to talk about a partner something that's going on, and then you're going to have a sales, area. You need to have that repeated. So most people, started to do this where, your newsletters are the same every couple of weeks, with new information. You have, pages on your website, whether they're blogs or case studies or, like breakdowns. Those should have like repeatable structure to them. And then the same goes for like outbound emails, and same goes for ABM motion, and same goes for ads. Like you will have repeatable formats. So what you should do is wrangle all these formats and just find examples of them, and then open up an AI tool. I use Claude and ChatGPT. You can kind of use them interchangeably. They both have their, their pros and cons. And you just say, I need you to come up with a prompt that describes the format of this type of content. So what we're going to use these AI tools to is actually have the AI tool write a prompt for you, which is like a big unlock that I've learned recently is you shouldn't be writing your own prompts. You should be asking AI to write prompts for you for the future use. So what you're going to do is you're going to say, I'm going to give you 5 examples of what our newsletter looks like. I want you to return a LLM prompt that is detailed enough that that another AI will be able to read this prompt and create this content repeatably and consistently. And then you're going to say, okay, I'm going to give you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All you do is copy and paste your assets from your company. So that's why having a good body of work will help you in the long run of, here's a repeatable thing that I'm known for. You give it 5 examples and you say, great, now write me an LLM prompt that only focuses on the format. So you say, don't worry about the style, just focus on the format and the structure of these pieces of content. And then click enter. And the LLM, you either Claude or ChatGPT, is going to return you a really long page that is going to break down line by line, paragraph by paragraph, exactly how your content is structured. And that is the first building block of using AI content is you need to have a format.
Yep.
So now that you've got these formats, then it's time to flip the script and say, great, now using these examples, tell me about the style and tone of my content. And then it's going to return to you an equally long prompt that's saying, Eric talks like this. Here's how Eric thinks about the world. Here are some cool things that Eric, that makes Eric's voice unique. So now you have 2 artifacts. One is the format in which your content appears, and the second is the tone in which that content is created. The third missing piece that you need now is new source material. So new ideas that are coming in fresh every week that your company is now disseminating. If you have a podcast, that's like the perfect use case for a podcast is we've just been jamming on stuff. Certainly there's cool ideas in here that are new information that my company can now talk about. So the final piece in the AI content workflow is create your prompts that are the building blocks of helping instruct the AI. And then the third thing is add now fresh insights that are generated by humans. It needs to be human generated, or else you're relying on the large language models to just come up with bullshit that it thinks is right. It's not going to be right. You need to have humans talking and creating ideas that then feeds the top of it. Yep. So then it combines the 3. It combines the transcript from your human conversations with the format that you want the end result to be in. And it applies your brand guidelines by giving it the tone and style that you want it to be done. And that's how you get the final piece, which is actually a really well done, pretty much there, 90% of the way there, piece of content that you can actually publish. Because the big thing I hear with a lot of people who use AI to try to create content is they skip one of those steps and they're just not happy with the results. They're like, this is not good. I'm not going to publish this. And so they or feel like they're fighting AI. Since using this AI workflow, the results I've been getting are essentially ready to go. And then the last step is a human editor to make sure that you're fact checking, making sure that and when it mentions a number, that the number's right, that it's accurately spelling people's names, and that paragraphs make sense. But that's it. And then that piece of content is good to ship, which is wild because 2 years ago I was like, oh, 90% of the stuff is still written by me, 10% AI.
Yeah.
It's completely flipped, where now that workflow works for 99% of the time, and there's just light editing at the end of it.
Yeah, that was great. I love that. And within the context of how you're doing it, so that was the process. What are your all's structures or your so basically you've got the front end, which is the pillar piece of source material. So now that you've set it up with the AI platform in terms of the styles, the formats, things like that, and the prompt, the
Mhm.
style, the formats. Now you need the source material, which
Mhm.
is coming from human experts, and then the back end being the, you described it as like almost like the structure, whether it's like newsletter, social content,
Mhm.
video content, what have you. So maybe if we could touch on like both of those for what you all are doing, like what's the front end source material, like how are you generating that, or what ways are you doing that, and then how are you thinking about the distribution side?
Mhm. The So the way that workflow works best is if you are able to record video first, like to make sure that human concept, the human conversation, the source material is on video. The best way to do this is to have one or more people at your company act as reporters or personalities, and to go out and interview customers, subject matter experts, internal employees at your company, or like other partners, and gather that information. The beauty with this workflow is the conversation doesn't need to be that structured. In
Mhm.
the same way that if you were a human transcriber, you'd be annoyed if we jumped around from topic to topic and there was no flow to the conversation and there was hard stops and like incomplete sentences. You'd be like, oh, this is annoying. AI doesn't really care. AI will listen to your garbage recording. And if there was 2 or 3 minutes of the 30 that are like gold, it chances are it'll find those and be able to like pull it out. So I wouldn't, so it kind of depends on the company. If you have existing channels in which you are recording video, so a podcast would be an example of a place where you're already gathering this type of source material. A webinar is another place where you're gathering this source material. So those would two be like the easiest ones that are just people are already doing and they can just repurpose in another way. But if you wanted to go more deep, you could have, very specific like people reaching out to particular subject matter experts, particular customers. One area that I think is super underutilized is sales calls and
Yes.
recordings that are in your Gong or Clary or whatever.
Yep.
If you're recording sales and customer success conversations, that's a hugely undertapped area of source material. You will need to scrub it and de-anonymize
Yep.
that information so that people aren't like, why you can't just take my call recording. So you need to like follow some different rules. But if you're just using it for ideation, like if you're just using those transcripts to come up with broad categories of ideas and content, you're not actually calling out that particular use case. I think that's a great place to also look for gold. So that's the front end, is like
Mhm.
essentially people on camera.
Yep.
Is People on camera is not going away. It's actually going to get more important as a function that every B2B business is going to need to have. I've been calling these personality marketers. So these people like
Mhm.
need to be on camera a lot. Like their part of their role should be like X number of hours on camera per week, talking with all these people. Um, and another kind of skill set that they should have is they should actually be fairly educated or like a subject matter in their own field, like in this field, because they need to be able
Yep.
to get into the details. They need to be able to shoot the shit with like really smart people who are industry leaders in your area.
Yes.
Especially if you're in like a technical industry, you want to have someone who's good at, like, you need to be a personality. You can't be boring, but you also need to know what you're talking about. So it's like
Yes.
a double thing. So that's like one category, one area where I see a content roles evolving. We're already
Yep.
starting to see um, B2B catch up and have more like creators on LinkedIn who are doing
Yep.
this type of content where they're like on camera, they're like creating skits and whatnot. I think the funny, like the entertaining side of a creator's world, you know, we'll figure it out. Some people are better at that than others,
Yep.
but the educational and the source material gathering side of a personality marketer is immediately valuable, and should not be underrated. Um, so then the second role, I'll get to kind of answering your question of like, what does the
Yeah.
end result look like?
Yep.
So the second role, uh, broadly speaking, would be an AI content operations person.
Mhm.
So this person is the one who is creating the prompts, kind of like that exercise we did earlier. So this person is like making prompts and plugging them together and using either proprietary in-house workflows or using tools like Copy AI and Zapier to like plug the tubes together so that information is passed from one medium,
Yep.
is ran through an AI, and the desired outputs are created, and then those outputs are then plugged into other information and turned into these finished products. So it's sort of just like the whole content operation that used to be done manually and still should be, like certain areas needs to have human intervention to like check that it's going well. But I've gotten a lot of great results where you just build workflows that trickle down to each other, and you feed it a whole bunch of like, unstructured recordings, and at the end you're left with a blog post that is essentially ready to be edited and ready to go. So that's like a content operations person. This
Mm-hmm.
person needs to be like systems thinking. They need to understand how content operations works. Like you can't
Yep.
just kind of jump in there and ask AI to do everything. You still need to know the details at every step of what you need to get. But most importantly, this person they'll become the taste maker of the content. Like they need to have really good taste and know what good looks like and know what bad looks like. But they need to be able to translate that into AI prompts. Like
Mm-hmm.
you're going to be doing so much that you're not actually going to have time to manually make these adjustments. You need to learn how to like translate your taste into prompts, which I think is a really cool skill that some people I've seen are getting really quite good at. But we can all benefit from like translating taste to prompts. Um, and then the last bit to answer your question around the distribution
Yep.
is, now that you've got all these assets, how are we still getting them out there? I really hope that some AI tools come that are do the distribution for me, because that to me is the most painful part of content, is the
Mm-hmm.
distribution, even though it's the most important part. And so, but the role that I've kind of been thinking about is these people are actually not going to be just copy and pasting it into LinkedIn, copy
Yeah.
and pasting into the newsletter. They're actually going to be creating campaigns.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think this has been a big change in the market, the B2B marketing world in the last couple of years. Is you're not this advice is particularly for startups. You're not going to stand out in your market if you're just doing always on marketing. So if you're just
Yep.
posting on social daily, if you're just putting out newsletters, if you're just writing, doing ads, that'll get you a baseline amount of pipeline. That'll
Mm-hmm.
get you a baseline amount of revenue. But in order to like stand out and create like meaningful impact, you need to do big campaigns, and these need to be multi-channel. So they need to activate across every channel you've got. So it's not just an ad campaign, it's not just an email campaign, it's all of them talking about the same thing at the same time for a couple weeks. And that's how you activate your audience. That's how you activate your market. That's how you break into like people's mind share who didn't know about you before.
Yep.
That's how you get large distribution. And that's how you, sort of create these spikes that over time complement the always on stuff. And it adds to that like baseline capacity and creates brand moments that add like it's a sort of a 1+1 = 3 situation, where if you're doing always on
Yeah.
plus these campaigns every quarter,
Yep.
you're going to get way further in the matter of a year than you would if you just stuck to like traditional marketing. So these people I'm going to be calling like campaign operators or like
Mm-hmm.
campaign directors. And these people are like part of the strategy with the personalities and the operations people to be like, here's the campaign that we're going to do in 3 months, in 2 months. Let's work backwards from what we need to create, and then you'll go interview people and get source material. You'll create custom prompts that will create these assets that I need for my campaign, and then I'll do the coordinating of the distribution,
Mm-hmm.
the outside partners, the creators, everyone else who needs to know about this and be activated. And so that person is like super focused on turning attention into pipeline, and looks sort of like a growth marketer slash product marketer slash content person. It's kind of like a mix of all of those people.
Mm-hmm.
But the source is like content coming in, and then they make it a big unified campaign.
Are they posting? Are they the one actually hitting publish on the always on stuff too?
I think the operators will own
Publishing?
the channel, the daily channel,
Yeah.
the daily drumbeat.
Yep.
Because with some of these automation tools, you can literally plug it in so that um, it, AI writes a LinkedIn post and then it automatically appears in your LinkedIn draft folder.
Yeah.
And then you can like manually approve and disapprove them. So there's still a little bit of like manual
Yep.
stuff that needs to happen there. So it kind of depends on capacity and who's working on what. But I would love to see. Essentially, I want AI to replace copy and pasting. This is my like content.
Yeah.
You don't realize how much copy and pasting it is. I never want to have to copy and paste again.
Yep.
Please solve this problem, someone.
Take my money. So okay, yeah, I love this breakdown. The AI content. One last question on the AI content operations role. So, because when I think of just that title, content operations, I'm not necessarily immediately thinking the taste maker editorial. So the final 90 to 100%, because the AI prompts and the structure will drive the 90%, but then you do need that editorial overlay on the final 10%. So, but it sounds like how the way you're thinking about it is that person's going to own that. And then the campaign director, they're the ones basically doing, for lack of a better term, the moonshots, essentially, to have moments that are worthy of attention, that can drive followership, impressions, not only just to the always on stuff, like not only just to the company, but also to the always on stuff. Because obviously one of the best ways to create followers and people who are paying attention to you is to give them a reason to. And so this is what you've described is one of those. So, but is the AI content operations person that editorial lens on the outputs as well? So they're the ones actually going in and like refining that last 10%.
So I guess it depends on your company size. Like these roles can all be done by one person.
Yep.
You'll be stretched.
It'll be a lot. Yeah.
But it's possible. You would just, be on camera for like an hour a week, and then that hour of footage would turn into assets that you then manually distribute.
Yep.
And on their side of your desk, you're also planning that big campaign. This is, I think, the world that most of us are living in right now, where you're a small content team and you're having to do this all yourself and figure it out yourself.
Yep.
I think at a more mature place, you would then have 3 separate people and they're focusing on those 3 different areas. I think there is a 4th role that would be sort of like an editor. I think an editor could also doesn't necessarily need to be in-house, because you've already done all the work of making it on brand, link appropriately to your pages internally. Like AI did that hard work. So now a professional editor, or like someone in the company who is, the CM, the person, essentially you need someone to read it at the end of it to like approve it.
Yeah.
If you might be busy to do that. So I'm open to either the personality being an editor or the operator being the editor. Like someone can fill in for that. I don't think that's necessarily like, make or break of this whole process.
Yeah, this is very similar to like the role structure breakdown I've thought of and kind of talk about recently as well, which is like I've described it as like the MVP for like a great content team structure. How I've seen it recently, and this aligns very closely to what you've described, is 3 roles as well. The thought leader, which is the domain expert, subject matter expert. In your case, the personality marker, which the personality marketer, which I think is a great term for it. I've described it as the content architect, which in this case would be the AI content operations role, very similar. And then the last piece, which is slightly different, and I love your campaign director framing, is the production team. So the content architect is basically bridging the gap between the thought leader and the production team. And because the goal here is the personality marketer or the thought leader has to do as little as possible after the recording, before or after the recording of the content.
Yeah.
Because usually, if this is done well, it's someone who is in the role of, in a senior role, possibly, the CEO even. Um, and they're very busy. And so if they've got the domain expertise, it means that they're busy and you need the domain expertise. And so the goal is to make their job with creating content as minimally time invasive as possible.
Yeah.
So I think the thought leader and content architect should be internal, because the content architect also needs to know your customers, your product, everything going on inside of the company. I think it's really hard to outsource that.
Yeah.
I have thought that the production team, in creating some of the media or
Mhm.
some of the actual, end products, can be internal or external. And then yeah, the campaign director for like the moonshots, the pairing of the always on versus like, these like blitz efforts,
Yeah.
I think is a great breakdown. So what have you seen in terms of one of these campaigns maybe recently that has been really effective for you all? Or like, yeah, maybe you could just share like what's the always on for you all, and then what are some recent, campaigns that you thought have been notable or, really valuable for you all?
Hmm. For always on, it's social, just LinkedIn,
Okay.
um, email newsletter every week to sort of our main subscriber base,
Yep.
like a subset of all of like our entire CRM, but like people who've subscribed and opted in. And that's really the place where we can like tell them behind the scenes, give them like the juicy stuff, and then like tease at future stuff. Um, we're running ads, and we are doing events, but those are like seasonal. So like I wouldn't call those always on because they're not happening every day. They're happening, monthly.
Right.
And then outbound. So
Mm-hmm.
the BDR function falls within marketing at Mutiny, so they
Okay.
would be considered like a marketing channel that's happening as well.
Yep.
So um, all those are chugging along, but obviously need like new things to talk about. So that's where like we've run webinar video series where
Mm-hmm.
you do a bunch of interviews, and you can bunch those interviews together to make the production easier,
Yep.
and then you can drip them out over the course of a month and turn those transcripts into the content that feeds those always on channels.
Yep.
um so those are always like, those sort of like baseline need to be established and have workflows that they're always on. And then side of the desk,
Yep.
fit, it should be in an ideal world, the always on stuff takes up 20% of your time because you've optimized it so well and systematized it so well that it just happens, and you're just kind of maintaining and making sure that it's good. And then you can spend 80% of your time doing campaigns. In reality, that's a little flipped.
Yeah.
And the campaigns are always like a push at the last minute to like make it
Yep.
happen. But a campaign that we ran that we launched a couple weeks ago is it was where we open sourced our entire target account list. So Mutiny is helping B2B businesses to do their account based marketing and personalization. And so we were like, in a marketing meeting, we're like, what if we just like showed everyone how we're doing it? We're like, okay, I guess we're like literally open sourcing our strategy. So it kind of had three parts. One was, here's a webinar that we've done in the past that shows how we've built our target account list. So that's like, ability to repurpose old stuff, but give it a fresh new coat of paint and incorporate it into a tight campaign narrative. But the big piece was, here's literally 5,000 target accounts that we're going after.
Yep.
You might be in this list. Your competitors might be in this list. Come check it out. And then, so that was the hook, is like, you're in this list, come check it out. They would come look at it and find their company page. And then they would click on their company name, and it would open up a microsite that is personalized specifically for that company that was created using Mutiny. So that was how we hooked it in. Product features into the campaign, is like, oh, by the way, the thing you're looking at was built using Mutiny. how else would we have been able to create 5,000 microsites manually? That would have been a nightmare. Um, and then the last bit was like, great, now that you've kind of seen this, see how we are using our product by activating it in other ways. And so that linked to a whole bunch of other resources of like showing how Mutiny is using Mutiny, and how we're doing this campaign. So it's like a very meta campaign because it's like showing behind the scenes of how the campaign happened and what the marketing tools we're using and everything like that. Which is because I play in the marketing technology space, is like you need to break the fourth wall and show people what you're doing because everyone knows the tactics already. So you need to be a little cheeky and fun with it. So that campaign at the end of the day, was a repackaging and a reskinning of a lot of other content and stuff that we had done already. And we put it together in a nice package and then made a big concerted push at the same time across all the channels to like gather people's attention who would have probably just been like who haven't read the newsletter in a couple months and see our ads, but they don't think about us anymore, or like, see us on social every week, but like whatever. This is like, oh, there's something worth paying attention to Mutiny, and it's at a cadence that is like digestible because you do get a little bit annoyed with brands that are like in your face every single day. You're like, okay, cool it, I don't care. So if you're just like doing always on stuff plus a big thing every quarter, you're like really kind of taking advantage of both sides of the equation of the like gradual audience building, but then also like activating at the ideal time when you have product stuff to talk about, when you have a new content series. Like there's a lot of cool ways that you can use campaigns to draw attention to the stuff you're doing.
That's super. It's killer. One comment and then one question. So my comment would be that, speaking of like the B2C direct to consumer, kind of like leading the charge on like effective modern social, and just modern content first, marketing in general. This seems like a playbook straight out of that, which is they are so good. A lot of these direct to consumer companies at not making the product the marketing, but the product inside of the marketing. And that's exactly what you did here. You didn't make the product like, come look at our product. You said, come look at this thing that's relevant and cool and helpful to you that you might be interested to check out. And by the way, it just so happens inside of that is our product.
Yeah.
And that's the highest, like, evolved way to do that, I think, right now. So that's really cool. Number two would be a question. How are you measuring all this stuff? Like some companies, every company is different on what their leadership teams or their board and things like that, require them to have measurement and attribution, in the lens through for all of that stuff. But how do you know what of these are working in the way, like, how do you, what constitutes good for you all, or in terms of how you're measuring it? And then how do you know which ones are working in relation to what your goal is?
There's sort of two different ways. So one is our entire marketing team is measured on meetings booked, which is the leading indicator of pipeline. So we all have this metric and we break down our quarterly goal by week. So we can literally check in every single week to be like, how close are we to the weekly goal? And we take into account holidays and like long weekends and seasonality. So when we're setting our goals with the finance and biz ops side of the business, we can look at it and be like, okay, well, Labor Day is coming up. We're going to get 0 meetings booked on the Monday and Tuesday. So let's not let's not shoot ourselves in the foot and give ourselves targets that aren't ever going to be achievable. So we can look at that, and everyone in marketing is rushing towards that goal. So the attribution becomes less important because we're all measured by the same thing. Yes, we break it down by channel so we can see the health of inbound versus outbound versus ads versus events. So each of us have like a metric that we can own and run forward towards. But I'm not looking at I'm not looking at likes and impressions, because that's not pipeline. So like, I don't even care about those numbers. I obviously will check in on them and be like, oh, well, haven't been getting many likes this week, so let me try something new. But I just use them as like gut feeling stuff to be like, should I change the strategy a little bit? Yes, no, or keep going where we're going. So that's one, is like pipeline and meetings booked by the marketing team. And then the second piece is, because we also run an account-based motion where we have a very defined ideal customer persona and a profile of what companies make good customers, we know exactly who we're trying to sell to. We're not trying to spray and pray and be like, anyone who comes through our door could be a possible customer. But like, when someone tries to book a meeting with us and we know that they already aren't qualified, we don't even let them book meetings. We like politely tell them, sorry, you're not ready. We're not ready for you. You're not ready for us. It would be a messy relationship. So the other way we measure it is by account activation. We know the 5, 7, or 7,000 accounts that we're trying to sell to, and we can map out, and we're sort of building this within our product, but then also within like our own dashboards, is like, what accounts have gone from like no activity. They've never been to our website. They've never followed us on LinkedIn. They've never subscribed to any emails, to like, oh, they checked out our website. And we can start seeing account movement. And like, some people call it like account penetration, is like, are these accounts even aware that we exist yet? And then, so that's sort of like top of funnel now, is like turning a account from a ghost that has never heard of Mutiny into like, okay, cool. Now they've been to our website and now they're on our email newsletter. Great. We can start to nurture them. But at the other, like the further along is, okay, we have one contact who's in a sales conversation at Mutiny. How do we get a second contact from the same account who's also on the buying committee to start talking with that AE, so we can get them on the phone? Because we know that if we have two people in the buying committee who are already bought in, it's like increases our close rate X number amount. So that's like, and you can kind of be prescriptive along the way, where it's like, what do we want to focus on right now? Are we focusing on top of funnel? And you can kind of look at your pipeline at that time and be like, okay, these healthy accounts are at a good place. Let's not spend any marketing thought and time to like get them over the line. Let our salespeople deal with it. We need to start filling the pipeline as they close. So let's get the middle, like those warm accounts, like let's get those activated in specific ways through different channels. And we want to make sure that we're planning for the future. So like, let's start getting some ghost accounts on the radar, knowing who Mutiny is. And we can do that through ads, outbound, specific content, like industry stuff. So that's sort of how we think about it, is like real-time pipeline, but then future account landscape and understanding where people are in their journey and, being able to forecast accordingly.
Super smart. Last question on that. Would you then say that like the always on stuff? So the question kind of would be, when you look at that, how do you know which individual either always on thing or the sort of spot campaigns that you should do or not do anymore? And so one thing I've been thinking about with this a lot lately is like the always on stuff, the newsletter, the social, the video, the recurring video series, whatever format that is, YouTube series, podcast series, webinar series, whatever the personality marketer is going to do to record video content, is almost non-negotiable. It's like, we need this stuff to seed everything we're doing. So it's like, we don't even need to look at, should we do should we do this or should we not? Should we stop doing our newsletter because like open rates drop 5% or whatever? Talk to me about like how you think about that versus the overall goal, which is those leading indicators, pipeline, meetings booked, and then ultimately revenue.
Obviously, there's going to be variability across the year, and as channels evolve and algorithms change and open rates change and whatever. I think you kind of said it though, is that you need to have these functions be non-negotiable, where it's just like, we need source material.
Yep.
So whether we decide to publish it publicly and turn it into a YouTube channel
Yep.
that gets not a lot of views, but the transcripts are powering everything else.
Mhm.
It's like, what's the effort required to just publish it on YouTube? Not a lot. So
Yeah.
let's just do it. So there is like a little bit of like art and science here where you need to have the channel know-how that are we putting a lot of energy towards it or are we not? We're just dialing it in. And I think dialing it in is okay in some regards, just publishing just because you want to be there.
Mhm.
You're not going to win the channel. Like if you're just dialing in
Yeah.
YouTube, like it's a brutal spot to be. So you can't just dial that in.
Yep.
And you need to right size your expectations. It's like, I'm not focusing on YouTube. I'm publishing there, but I'm not focusing on a channel growth there. So don't
Yep.
be mad at me that it got 7 views because
Yep.
that transcript actually turned into everything else we've been talking about for the last 2 weeks.
Yep.
And so you need to, I think what AI has opened up for us is that you can do more. And now it's up to you as this is where the human side of it comes in. Like, forget operations and like marketing tactics. This is like human to human, like communication. You need to be able to convince your team and your boss that these things are worth anything or worth time to have, focus on, and be willing to be like, walk away from something and be like, I guess I couldn't win this one. Let's just leave it. We can come back to it later, whatever. As long as you are like focusing on a few things that are driving
Yep.
business results and align with the strategy. Like if you need to work with your customer experience team because they need stuff, they need assets that they don't have and they don't have capacity to do it. Sometimes the content person needs to be for hire and just jump in and be like, all right, I will repurpose a bunch of stuff because you need it. And it came top down that this is like a huge priority.
Yep.
That's why having systems in place that automates a lot of the creation makes it so much more fun than it was before, because it used to be this or that. Now it can be this and that because this thing's already chugging along in the background and happening with or without human intervention. So that's like kind of the cool part, where it's like a lot of the stuff that I didn't really enjoy doing anyways is being automated. Some people complain that like the creative side is being automated, but I think there's room for both sides of the brain, and there's room for people who love doing creative to not let that be used by AI and them be all in on creative. And then there's people who are more systems thinkers who want to be in the nitty gritty piping to really double down on learning how to use AI and prompting to do really good work at that. And then they can ask AI to do the creative stuff that they don't like doing. So it's like the creative role, or the role of the content person still is very valuable and will kind of be separated in a few different ways, I think.
Oh yeah. I mean, like, content, you could argue, is the most important thing for B2B marketing over the next 10 years. So like the tools that are available to make it easier, faster, potentially require less people, those are all obviously like proliferating. But but at the same time, the importance of content is going exponential right now because products are getting commoditized. It's easier to create software than ever. Like, there's more competition than ever. The demand capture channels, Google, Google AdWords, lead gen, ads on LinkedIn and stuff like that, they're getting cost prohibitive. So like, you could argue this is going to be, or if not already, one of the most important ways to go to market with your marketing in general. So to me, I think it's a great time to be in content. And I appreciate you dropping a lot of knowledge on like how you're doing it, because this was a really practical breakdown of your approach. And I think it's really smart. And I think it's going to be fun to watch. I for one, am going to continue to study both your always on, but also your campaigns. I think a lot of people can learn from that. So thanks for the time, Stu. I appreciate it, man. It was great catching up. If anybody wants to kind of connect with you or follow along, do you have anywhere in particular you'd like to mention?
Yeah, LinkedIn's the only place. Know your strength, and I'm only doing one place, right? But I totally agree with what you just said. Content is still the most effective and efficient way to reach new customers at scale. And the better you are at content, the cost of content goes down to essentially zero.
Yep.
Like the bigger your audience, the cheaper your cost of acquisition is.
Yep.
And it's just like a brand and demand baked into one. So I
Yep.
would say everyone who's listening who's nervous about the future of content, I would say don't be nervous that content as a function isn't going to exist.
Yeah.
But be cognizant of your underlying skills and things that you like to spend your time doing, and move towards directions, and
Yes.
be the person at your company who's like bought into AI and is making stuff happen with AI, because it's a very, people are seeing it as a very important skill set right now. So it would set you up nicely in the future.
Totally. Awesome. Well, appreciate the time again, Stu. This was fun. And we'll catch everybody on the next episode.